bomber. We made everyone on the ground aware. Operations had briefly halted, but then started again. Plain and simple, we were ignored. Our expertise was disregarded. No one was held accountable for our safety. About 1730, Staff Sergeant Darren Hoover, friend and mentor, came to get me from the tower to go help find an Afghan interpreter in the crowd. We found the interpreter and his brother, born with American passports. They told us of 5 family members still in the canal. I stayed there waiting for the family members standing against a 2-foot canal wall. 10 minutes passed. Then a flash and a massive wave of pressure. I'm thrown 12 feet onto the ground, but instantly knew what had happened. I opened my eyes to Marines dead or unconscious lying around me. A crowd of hundreds immediately vanished in front of me, and my body was catastrophically wounded with 100 to 150 ball bearings now in it. Almost immediately, we started taking fire from the neighborhood, and I saw how injured I was with my right arm, completely shredded and unusable. I saw my lower abdomen soaked in blood. I crawled backwards roughly 7 feet because I thought I was still in harm's way. My body was overwhelmed from the trauma of the blast. My abdomen had been ripped open, every inch of my exposed body, except for my face, took ball bearings and shrapnel. I tried to get up, but could not. Laying there for a few minutes, I started to lose consciousness when I heard Chaz, my team leader, screaming my name as he ran to me. His voice calling to me kept me awake. When he got to me, he dragged me to safety and immediately started triaging me, tying tourniquets on my limbs and doing anything he could to stop the bleeding and start plugging wounds with the help of the other Marines. I was awake through most of it, screaming, moaning, and cursing. I ask you to please ask me about getting shot at the tower in Abbey Gate and how no one wanted my report post-blast. Even NCIS and the FBI failed to interview me. Asked me to elaborate on my ordeal post-blast, and asked me about this one little girl and her family that I reunited. Our military members and veterans deserve our best because that is what we give to America. The withdrawal was a catastrophe in my opinion, and there was an inexcusable lack of accountability and negligence. The 11 Marines, 1 sailor, and 1 soldier that were murdered that day have not been answered for. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Sergeant, for that very powerful and courageous testimony. I now recognize Ms. Mackler for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you to Sergeant Parkes for everything, and what happened to you matters, and I'm grateful for the opportunity here today to hear these stories, which were our lives for so long, but that everyone should know about. Before I begin, I also want to express how privileged I feel to be included on this panel today on International Women's Day. I have met and worked alongside incredibly courageous women, Afghan, American, from the world over in the last 2 years. And today I bring them in this room with me, and I hold in my heart the voices and the courage of the girls and women still in Afghanistan who are silenced and living out of view. I'm the Executive Director of Immigrant ARC, a coalition of legal service providers in New York. I'm also a visiting senior fellow at the Truman Center for National Policy. I've been an immigration attorney and advocate for nearly 20 years, and I'm on the leadership committees of both the Evacuate Our Allies Coalition and the Afghan Evac Coalition. I first became involved in efforts to evacuate our vulnerable Afghan allies in January of 2021, when a small group of us started pushing for special immigrant visa holders and others to be included in the then imminent troop withdrawal. Like countless other civil society leaders, veterans, and everyday Americans, I pivoted on August 15th to help facilitate the Non-Combatant Evacuation Operation, or NEO. I am humbled and awed by the actions and sacrifices of my fellow panelists and those they speak for today. At the same time, I know that what happened in August of 2021 was the product of decades long of inaction and systemic failures that we can no longer ignore. To ensure that the actions we heard today were not in vain, we must use this moment to create and implement better solutions. After all, as we've been told, those who ignore history are condemned to repeat it. We saw that in Afghanistan. We tried to learn the lessons from Vietnam and we were ignored, and we cannot allow a future generation to go through this as well. So what are those solutions? First and foremost, Congress should pass the Afghan Adjustment Act. Afghans who have all, including Afghans that we all, including many of those of us here in this hearing today, work to evacuate to safety in the United States are resettled. And though there are challenges, many of them are thriving. This is their home, and they deserve to have the peace of mind of knowing that it is their permanent home. The AAA would allow those who are here to obtain permanent legal status. It would strengthen pathways for those that we left behind. And it would bring new options to help those that need them the most. Additionally, passing the AAA will ensure increased oversight in the ongoing relocations and resettlement. We also must increase interagency coordination. One of the biggest failures of the U.S. government was the inability to functionally coordinate across agencies ahead of the 2021 withdrawal. Too many agencies, including the Department of Defense, the Department of State, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Council, and others, had overlapping jurisdictions and no clear mandate, which allowed for too much passing of the buck. However, the White House refused to create this mechanism of their own accord. Congress should use its Article 1 authority to mandate a body like that going forward. In the years and months since the evacuation, much of this infrastructure has been created in an ad hoc manner through various departments. Congress must ensure that the executive branch coordinates these independent teams in one unified line of effort. We must codify the care team and continue the relocations. One of the most innovative approaches we've seen in the aftermath of the Afghan crisis is the creation of public-private partnerships, in this case named the Coordinator for Afghan Relocate Efforts, CARE, which is housed in the Department of State, and it helps coordinate ongoing relocations. Congress should work on legislation to codify this effort and systematize government civil society partnerships. I should note the role that Afghan Evac, a coalition of over 200 veteran organizations, as well as civil society groups, have had in shaping CARE. We must improve the SIV system. The improvements to the Special Immigrant Visa Program will not only provide avenues to honor the promise we made to our Afghan allies, but it will also be an important foundation and roadmap for how we support U.S. allies and collaborators in future conflicts. We must authorize enough visas to account for the entire eligible population, provide resources to allow for adjudication of applications within the 9 months statutorily required, provide flexible consular processing, and invest in diplomatic and logistical capital to solve procedural issues, and require the Department of State to catalog and search U.S. government contracts, such as the DoD did in Project Rabbit, to take the administrative burden off of applicants who are in danger. Finally, we need a permanent, lasting, and functional SIV program. We need resources dedicated to protecting current and future allies. The U.S. government relies heavily on local partners during conflict, but falls short on protecting those collaborators after the military engagement ends. We need Congress to create an Ombudsman for Allies office, a high-ranking U.S. official with the authority and responsibility to serve the interest and protection of wartime allies so that this never happens again. And finally, we need better pathways. We need to modernize and invest resources in the U.S. refugee system, which is administered by the Department of State, and we need to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Every week, me and my colleagues get asked for help on behalf of an Afghan or an Afghan family, and every week my answer is the same. I simply have no options to offer you. If they did not come through the NEO, they have no pathways to come to the United States. Our immigration laws prevented us from being able to meaningfully help tens of thousands of Afghans, to help those who are left behind, as well as to prevent the same catastrophe from happening in the future. We must make legal pathways to the United States broader and easier to navigate. Mr. Chairman, you said at the end of your remarks, we need to get them out. We need to get them the hell out. We need immigration pathways to do that. Help us change our immigration laws so that we can get them out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McElwain. I also appreciate your assistance getting so many Afghans out of there. And I agree with you. We have to get them the hell out. I now recognize Mr. Lucier for his opening statement.
Chairman, Ranking Member Meeks, members of the committee, thank you for inviting me here today to speak on this important topic that is so close to my heart. I'd also like to thank my fellow witnesses here today, veterans, those who were on active duty during those chaotic weeks in August, and other volunteers and advocates who have been and done so much powerful work in this space. In addition to the witnesses here today, I'd also like to thank some organizations that I've worked with and had the honor to know who've made an incredible difference these last 17 months. The International Institute of St. Louis, our local resettlement agency, which has welcomed nearly 1,000 Afghans into our community in St. Louis, who make our community stronger, and they continue to welcome more Afghans and other refugees today. The Afghan Evac Coalition, which is comprised of more than 200 organizations, both private volunteer efforts like my own, and larger traditional advocacy organizations who advocate on behalf of immigrants, migrants, and refugees. The Evacuate Our Allies, our sister coalition with Afghan Evac, who does incredible work on advocacy and teaches us all about complex immigration policy. The entire ecosystem of volunteers from all across the country who may not be affiliated with a group, but who have stepped up during this time of crisis to assist those in need. And my own organization, Team America Relief, which at our height was comprised of more than 220 volunteers, assisting more than 70,000 Afghans seeking safe passage from that country who currently face dire risks, and those who've already made their way to the United States who face an uncertain legal future as their status remains in a difficult place. My name is Pete Lucier. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2008 after graduating from St. Louis University High School. I served for 5 years as an 0311 infantry rifleman in the United States Marine Corps and deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. During that time in that deployment and in my work since, the failures of that war, the lack of oversight and unclear mission became more and more clear. Those failures were codified in the fall of Kabul in August of 2021. The subject of the hearing today is the weeks leading up to those chaotic 2 weeks and the period after. However, many mistakes were made over the course of the last 22 years that have led us to this moment, and our examination of those mistakes must include an urgent focus on finding solutions to the grave threats that so many Afghans that I work with and so many others work with face today. As we examine those mistakes and look at solutions, if I leave this committee with only one thought, it's this: it's not too late. We're going to talk a lot today about all of the mistakes that were made leading up to that, but urgent action right now will save so many lives. There's so many people that so many organizations work with today, and it's not too late to take swift action to assist those. Prior to the fall of Kabul in 2022, civil society engaged with both Congress and the Biden administration to take a look at how we could get more of our allies out faster. Unfortunately, that process never materialized, and on August 15th, Kabul fell to the Taliban. My involvement in this movement began around August 15th. I began some fundraisers for resettlement charities here in the United States, and I hoped that would be the sum total of my involvement. But shortly after those fundraisers were launched, one of those resettlement agencies reached out to me as a veteran and asked if I could help get just one person through the gates. That started the last 17 months of my work in this space, just trying to assist one person. By the end of those 2 weeks, the one person on my list had grown to 4,000. And by the end of 2021, Team America had more than 70,000 names in its database that it was seeking to assist. During that period in August, there were specific challenges that groups like mine faced. Coordination with government was difficult during that chaotic time. In addition to that, the private groups like my own formed a chaotic environment. There wasn't clear prioritization, and inequities in those private evacuations led to inequitable outcomes. Many Afghans remain trapped in third countries as a result of movement across international borders, and we continue to seek to assist those today. After that time, civil society groups continued to engage with both the State Department, the administration, and Congress. We broadened our efforts to continue to assist so many left behind. I apologize. We cannot ignore the roots of this crisis. Systemic issues over multiple administrations from both parties contributed to a major humanitarian need that neither party was willing to address. But this is not the story of a Biden failure or a Trump failure. This is a story of an American failure and the effect it has had and continues to have on Afghans who served alongside myself and so many others. The failures that led to this point are owned and shared by 4 administrations, by Congress, and by 320 million Americans. This was our war. It's crucial that we learn from these failures to know what actions must now be undertaken. And most importantly, as I said, it's not too late. For years, we have failed our allies, folks who fought and bled along folks like myself and my brothers and sisters in arms. But even now, swift action will make a dramatic impact on the lives of many. Moreover, such action will be keeping it with the highest ideals that we share as a nation. Thank you for the opportunity to share my testimony today, and thank you for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lusser. I now recognize Specialist Gunderson for his opening statement.
Good morning, Chairman McCall, Ranking Member Meeks, and members of the committee. It is an honor to be here today. Thank you for inviting me to speak and conducting this hearing on the disastrous withdrawal of Afghanistan. I was on the ground in Hamid Karzai International Airport, known as HKIA, in Kabul, Afghanistan during August 2021. I want America to know the truth. The Afghanistan withdrawal was an organizational failure at multiple levels. My name is Aiden Gunderson, and my desire to serve came from my mother, a former Army medic. I enlisted in the Army as an airborne combat medic before graduating high school in 2018. Stationed at Fort Bragg with the 82nd Airborne Division, I saw 2 deployments, one to Camp Tajir, Iraq in 2020, and then to Kabul. On August 12th, 4,000 soldiers prepared for a rapid deployment, destination unknown. 48 hours later, on my 21st birthday, 100 soldiers and I boarded a plane with no further confirmation on the mission. During the travel day, I went through many emotions, thinking about every possible scenario that we could face. Just before we landed, we learned that the president of Afghanistan fled the country and we would land in Kabul soon. I vividly remember the wheels touching down the night of August 15th and thinking to myself, are we going to land in a firefight? Not a single person on that plane was prepared for Kabul. A sense of dread spread over me, and to make matters worse, the only food and water we had was what we packed in our rucksacks before leaving America. To say all the supplies were scarce is an understatement. After 12 hours on the ground at HKIA, we finally had our first mission. On August 16th, we were told to secure the part of the northern boundary of HKIA. In the Army medic stay with the company first sergeant, I remember checking in on the soldiers in the Northern Guard towers. Up there, looking over Kabul, I saw large buildings and highways filled with Toyota trucks. These truck beds were loaded with 20 Taliban fighters with AK-47s and RPGs pointed in the air. The entire airport was surrounded. I also remember the chaos of hundreds of Afghans gathering on the runway. The U.S. troops needed support. We found an unmanned fire truck, started it up, and drove off. We came to the middle of the runway where there was where blood-saturated, dusty clothing and headscarves smoldered on the ground. These covered the dead bodies that had fallen from the landing gear of the plane that just took off. At this moment, I truly understand that the Afghans were risking everything, even death, to escape the Taliban. The crowd grew so unruly and dangerous that the U.S. leadership called Afghan allies to the airport to help us gain control. These Afghan partners did so by brutal means, but these actions saved our lives and allowed the evacuation to start. From August 19th on, I remained near Abbey Gate in a small shack where my company performed security operations and I treated injuries. As days passed, we heard round-the-clock gunshots and screams from Abbey Gate. The gunfire was either Taliban executing someone or a warning shot used for crowd control. It was complete chaos, and to make matters worse, there was no interpreters. On August 22nd, my first sergeant, my commander, and I went to Abbey Gate because of the escalating situation with the crowd. An Afghan man approached us with his wife and young daughter shouting, 82nd, 82nd, 82nd. At first we avoided him because our mission was security. He begged us to call the number on his phone. We did not understand, but we could see that his 8-month pregnant wife needed medical attention. The crowd had trampled her, and she needed to get to the hospital. However, we did not know where that was within the airport because no one had given us a map of HKIA. We searched for the Norwegian hospital and an abandoned Ford Ranger, and the family seated in the back. While First Sergeant drove, the Afghan handed his phone over. Congressman Mike Waltz was on the line. This Afghan man was his interpreter. The congressman thanked us for helping, and soon after, my first sergeant and my commander's phone numbers were spread to the various people back in the United States. This became the digital Dunkirk. Today, I sit beside retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann of Task Force Pineapple, who was one of many that coordinated through my first sergeant and commander nonstop. As text came in, First Sergeant would say, "Come on, Doc, we got more people to save." We received a pre-established system. Anyone with the pineapple image on their phone was then matched to our phone records. We searched the Afghans for explosives and weapons, and then rushed them through the gate. I still carry these horrific scenes of Abbey Gate, even the smell. Mothers carrying dead babies, and the Taliban mercilessly beating people and civilians begging for their lives. The crowd grew more desperate and erratic, and they knew they would be left behind. On August 26th, after 11 days on the ground, I exited my vehicle near the Abbey Gate. I took 10 steps from my vehicle and felt a heavy punch to my chest. I looked up and saw a large plume of smoke and debris shooting into the sky. Immediately, we ran towards the explosion, and the smell of feces and urine that constantly filled the corridors of HKIA was replaced with an overwhelming stench of iron. Screams from little children, women, and grown men echoed in the tight corridor. Marines and corpsmen around me fought through tears to provide life-saving aid to our motionless and severely injured American brothers and sisters. Over the next hour, I tried to save the lives of countless Marines. We all tried our best. It was a nightmare. An injured Marine with blood-soaked pants squeezed my hand as tightly as he could and looked into my eyes, yelling, "I don't want to die," as we took the first truckload of Marines into the hospital. I reassured him that he would be fine, but as they carried him inside, I did not know if he would survive. I was born 1 year before 9/11. For 20 years of my life, we were at war, and there I was watching the enemy take over the country's capital. Departing on August 31st, on one of the last flights out of the country, I was relieved to be headed home. But I wondered how the horror I just witnessed had changed me, how it would change us all. I can assure you that it has. This war is not over for millions of people in Afghanistan and the U.S. Thoughts of those 2 weeks have plagued my mind since coming home. I see the faces of all the people we could not save, all those that we left behind. I wonder if our Afghan allies fled to safety or they were killed by the Taliban. Every day I think about my brothers and sisters that died in Afghanistan and the family and friends missing them. Mostly I think about the 13 Americans killed at Abbey Gate. Their deaths should not have happened. They should be alive today, and I, like many others, should not be forced to be carried this burden for the rest of our lives. Please consider those 13 and me as you conduct this investigation. Please consider the youth of America who continue to serve and never put them in that position again. Please remember our allies left behind to face death because they served alongside us. Thank you for hearing the truth, and I look forward to your questions.